Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Today's video is all about one of the most iconic and battle proving aircraft of the Cold War era, the McDonnell Douglas F-4E Kurnass 2000. This particular aircraft served with the 201 Squadron based at Hadzer Air Base, and it was the first Israeli Air Force unit to receive the upgraded F-4E Kurnass 2000. Now, if you've ever looked into Israeli aviation history, you already know that the F-4 Phantom II wasn't just another fighter jet. When Israel brought the F-4E into service in 1969, it quickly became a cornerstone of the Israeli Air Force. This was an aircraft basically built for power. So this aircraft started life at the McDonnell Douglas factory in the United States as an F-4E Phantom II with a US serial number 71-0234, and that serial number simply reflects its place in US production, built in fiscal year 1971, and on July 18th, 1972, it was delivered to the Israeli Air Force. Once it entered Israeli service, it received a new identity, which was 184. So Israel commonly reassigned its own internal numbers to aircraft rather than keeping the original US serial visible in daily operations. As 184, the aircraft served as a standard Kurnass F-4E. Uh, During the 1970s, aircrafts from this batch were heavily used in the years following the Yom Kippur War, flying strike and air combat missions in a very demanding environment. Fast forward to the 80s, when Israel launched the Kurnass 2000 modernization program. Aircraft 184 was selected for this upgrade, and this is where the identity change happens. So, when it came out of modernization, it was redesignated with a new number, 584. So, this wasn't a random. The Israeli Air Force often changed aircraft numbers to reflect a new configuration or a certain role, so to speak. Now, with that said, so 584, it wasn't just a renumbering, it was practically a rebirth, and basically the new number 584 reflects that transformation. So, with all that in mind, let's take a look at the how F-4E Karnas was born. Let's dive in. The story of the Israeli F-4E Karnas 2000 is not just about extending the life of an aging aircraft. It's about adaptation, necessity, and a uniquely Israeli approach to air power. It reflects how a nation constantly under pressure and often outnumbered, they choose not to discard a proving platform, but instead reinventing it to meet the demands of a new era. Now, to understand the Kurnas 2000 story, we first have to go back to the origins of the legacy McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II in Israeli service. So, the first F-4 Phantom II aircraft landed on the Israeli soil on September 5th, 1969 under Peace Echo 1 program, following President Lyndon B. Johnson approval, marking a significant advancement in Israeli Air Force capability. So, by the late 1970s, the world had moved on. New fighters filled the skies, like the F 15 Eagle and the F 16 Fighting Falcon. Those fighters were faster, more agile, and most importantly, far more advanced electronically. However, the Phantom cutting edge was becoming outdated. Further, and instead of discarding the Phantom fleet, Israel made a pragmatic decision to upgrade the Phantom fleet. This wasn't just about saving money, though that mattered. It was about maximizing a platform that pilots trusted and engineers understood intimately. Further, Israel launched a major project called Kurnass 2000. The Kurnass was an Israeli project upgraded by the Israeli aircraft industries, locally designated Kurnass, meaning in Hebrew the sledgehammer. The project was aimed to extend the service life of existing F-4Es in the Israeli Air Force rather than going through the McDonnell Douglas specifications. Israel chose to modify the F-4 Phantom in-house and pack it with their own upgrades and technology. The Kurnass 2000 project was a culmination of decades of combat experience, technological adaptation, and strategic necessity. They did modify the weapon systems alongside the radar. So the key upgrades, including the AN/APG 76 radar, HOTAS controls, a digital mission computer, and capability to deliver more large and heavy advanced weapons. Um, as an example, like the Popeye air to surface missile and Python, along with the TV guided weapons capabilities, basically to deliver laser guided bombs. Also, one of the most ambitious proposals for the Kurnass 2000 was replacing the original J79 engines with more powerful Pratt& and Whitney PW 1120 engines. Well, the testing showed dramatic performance improvements in supersonic flight without using afterburners. Also increased climb rate and maneuverability, basically to keep it competitive against newer fourth generation fighters. However, due to the cost constraints, this upgrade was never implemented in operational aircraft. As a result, the Kurnass 2000 retained its original engines, and consequently, that limited its performance compared to newer fighters. But still, the Kurnass represented a massive leap forward in capability. The aircraft quickly became one of the backbone strike fighters of the Israeli Air Force. The Phantom earned its reputation in a hard way because the aircraft saw intense combat during the War of Attrition from 1969 to 1970, and later during the Yom Kippur War, 1973. In these conflicts, the F-4E proved both powerful and vulnerable. It could deliver heavy payloads deep into enemy territory, but also faced increasingly sophisticated air defense systems, particularly Soviet supplied surface to air missiles. Further, Israeli pilots had to innovate quickly, developing a new tactics to survive and succeed. So, by the late 1970s and into the 80s, however, the Phantom was beginning to show its age because of the newer aircraft, as I've mentioned earlier, like the General Dynamics F-16 and the McDonnell Douglas F-15 were entering Israeli service, bringing with them superior avionics, maneuverability, and survivability. Many air forces around the world began retiring their Phantoms for basically they were trying to relegating them to, let's say, to the secondary roles, so to speak. However, the story didn't end there, so Israel chose a different path. Rather than retiring the aircraft outright, Israeli planners recognized that the Phantom still had significant value, particularly as a strike bomber platform, because at the time, the emphasis were about, having aircraft to fly over the enemy territory and to bomb the airfields. Because the Phantom had range, payload capacity, and a large airframe that could accommodate modern systems. At this point, it wasn't lacking potential, it just needed a modernization, and that realization led to the Kurnass 2000 program. The idea behind the Kurnass 2000 was ambitious. We're talking about taking aircraft that was originally designed in 1950s and 60s and upgraded to remain relevant uh, in the late 20th century battlefield. Um, may some of you think this is something simple. Well, incidentally, this was not a simple avionics refresh. um, it was a comprehensive transformation that touched nearly every aspect of the aircraft's combat capability. So, at the heart of the upgrade was the integration of advanced avionics. One of the most significant changes was the installation of a modern mission computer and digital systems, basically replacing the large analog architecture uh, of the original F-4E. And this is basically allowed the aircraft to process information more effectively, plus integrate newer weapons. Another key component of this upgrade was the adaptation of a newer radar system widely associated with AN/APG 76 radar. This radar significantly enhanced the Phantom's ability to detect, track, and engage targets, both air to air and air to ground roles, and consequently brought the aircraft closer to the capabilities of more modern fighters, at least in terms of sensor performance. The cockpit itself underwent a dramatic transformation. The traditional gauges and dials were replaced or supplemented with multi-function displays, giving pilots more modern interface. This shift was more than cosmic. It changed how pilots interacted with the aircraft, improving situational awareness and reducing workload in many ways. Um, Evidently, the Kurnass 2000 cockpit represented a bridge between generations, shall we say, blending the ruggedness of the Phantom with the digital age. The weapon integration was another crucial aspect. The upgraded Kurnass could employ a wider range of precision guided munitions, including laser guided bombs and advanced air to air missiles. This allowed it to operate effectively in environments where accuracy and standoff capabilities uh, were increasingly important. We're talking basically in a region where threats were constantly evolving. At the time, the ability to strike precisely from a distance was invaluable for any fighter. Structurally, the aircraft also received attention. Airframes were reinforced and overhauled to extend their service life, and was essential, uh, as many of these aircraft had already seen years of intense use. So keeping them airworthy required not just upgrades, but also careful maintenance and refurbishment. But beyond the technical changes, the Kurnass 2000 represented something deeper, a shift in how the Phantom was used, meaning no longer a frontline dogfighter competing with newer platforms out there. The aircraft evolved into a specialized strike platform. It became a tool for delivering precision firepower, leveraging its strength rather than trying to match newer aircraft in every category. This transformation aligned with broader changes in air warfare. So by the 1980s and 1990s, the emphasis was increasingly on precision, electronic warfare, and information dominance. However, the Kurnass 2000 fit into this new paradigm, offering a cost effective way to maintain capability without relying solely on expensive new aircraft or new airframe, I should say. Um, it's also worth noting that the Israelis' experience with constant conflict played a major role in shaping the program. Unlike many countries that basically plan for hypothetical wars, but Israel's Air Force was continuously engaged, learning and adapting in a real time. The decision to upgrade the Phantom was not theoretical, but it was driven by practical needs and operational experience. There is a certain pragmatism in this approach. While other nations might retire an aircraft once it became outdated, while Israel looked at what the Phantom could still do and asked how to make it better. The results was not a perfect aircraft, but a highly capable and relevant. And of course, the Kurnass 2000 was not without its limitations. Despite the upgrades, it could not fully match the performance of newer fighters in terms of agility, stealth, or raw speed. The aircraft remained a large, non stealthy in an era where survivability increasingly depended on avoiding detection, but within its intended role, it remained pretty effective. Excuse me, folks, I had to take a little swag here. Anyways, another important note to make here, the Kurnass 2000 program was significant not only for Israel, but also for the broader aviation world. Um, It demonstrated that the older aircraft could be effectively modernized to remain operationally relevant, and this concept influenced similar upgrade programs in other countries, such as Japan's F-4E Kai and Turkey's F-4E 2020 Terminator, which was produced by Israeli Aerospace Industries specifically for the Turkish Air Force. So by the early 2000s, however, even the upgraded Phantoms was approaching to the end of its operational life. Newer platforms, including advanced versions of the F 16s or new blocks of the F 16s, I should say, and eventually the Lockheed Martin F 35 Lightning II, offered capabilities that even with tons of upgrades, the Phantom can't replicate those capabilities. Further, the Kurnass 2000 was gradually retired, closing a long chapter in Israeli aviation history, and yet its legacy remains significant. The Kurnass 2000 program demonstrated that modernization, when done thoughtfully, can extend the life and relevance of an aircraft far beyond its original expectations. It showed that the innovation is not always about building something new. Um, it can also mean reimagining what already exists. More importantly, it reflects the mindset of the Israeli Air Force brass, flexible, resourceful, and willing to change conventional thinking. The Phantom was a symbol of cutting edge technology and became a symbol of endurance and adaptability. In the end, we learned that the story of the Kurnass 2000 is not just about an aircraft upgrade. It's about the intersection of history, technology, and necessity. It's about how a machine designed for one era can be reshaped to serve in another. And it's about the people, engineers, planners, and of course the pilots themselves who saw potential where others might have seen the obsolescence. The sledgehammer did not simply fade away. It evolved, adapted, and continued to strike long after many thought its time had passed. I guess that's a perfect segue to check out the model impressions. So, when collectors talk about modern die-cast aircraft, few pieces generate as much quiet respect as a Hobbymaster HA1939 F-4E Kurnass 2000. Probably it's not flashy in the way some special edition schemes are. Let's say like a Tomcats from Jolly Rogers, but it doesn't need to be. Well, this model earns its reputation through authenticity, weight, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. What you get is a more scaled down artifact of Israeli aviation history. First impressions, a serious collector's piece. The model immediately feels substantial. That's not just perception. Hobbymaster built this piece with heavy die cast metal construction, giving it a density that plastic kits simply can't replicate. Although some parts of the construction of this model is made out of plastic, which is understandable because if you're looking to get the whole model made out of metal, there probably will be some tolerance issues here. So for me, it's not a big deal as long as the model represents the real article, even some parts made out of paper mache. Anyway, the aircraft represented is Kurnass 2584 of the 201 Squadron, and we're talking a real aircraft with combat lineage and historical significance. And this matters a lot, folks, because instead of a generic Phantom, you're getting a specific airframe with a story, including connections to Israeli ace Ifta Spectre, at which he scored at least one of his four F-4 Phantom victories in this specific aircraft. And that detail on its own, I would say, instantly elevate the model from a display piece to conversation piece. In terms of accuracy and details, where it truly shines, by and large, Hobbymaster's 172nd Air Power series is knowing for detail, but this model is a standout even within that lineup. The surface detail is excellent. The crisp panel lines and access panels, realistic antennas, and some small external features, accurate proportions of the long nosed F4E variant. The markings are especially noteworthy. Instead of decals, they're pat printed, which means they won't peel or fade over time. A huge plus for long term collectors. The livery captures the late service Kurnos 2000 look. The Hebrew 2000 markings and red tail of the 201 squadrons are on point. The subtle three tones paint scheme that reflect the operational use. I've always liked the Israeli jets, especially their three-tone camouflage. The mix of light tan, dark brown, and green, to me is just sensational. Now, speaking of features and display options, of course, a lot of display flexibility here. Um, Opening canopy revealing cockpit details, removable landing gear, gear up or gear down display, pilot figures included, display stand for in flight presentation, a full set of operational weapons and ordnance. It comes with a fairly comprehensive loadout and it's optional. Um, if some of you think the F4 Wild Weasel had large weapon with its AGM 78 standard arm, well, guess what? This one tops it with its huge 2 AGM 65 Popeye, the standoff missile, which is a major large scale air to ground guided munition. And you'll get one air to air AIM 9 Sidewinder missile, also, three external fuel tanks plus two different ECM pods. You'll get one ALQ 119, and the other one is, uh, I think, ALQ 131. Correct me if I botch on that, folks. Anyway, the Kurnass 2000 carried a also the internally mounted M61A1 Vulcan 20 millimeter cannon and a chin mounted under the nose. Definitely unique loadout configuration. However, there is one important note to make here about the refueling probe installation. So, the refueling probe does require to be glued on. I think due to the packaging, I'm assuming the manufacturer they can't cut out a hole for this particular probe. So I would recommend using a blue tack instead of permanent glue. It's up to you. Uh, just I would say just use a blue tack, just strong enough to hold it. It's a little tiny piece, very fragile. Um, in case you need to repackage the model basically without breaking it off, and that way you won't damage the paint, right? Also, use the panel line as a guideline to position the probe in the right area. So that's that. Anyway, with all that stated, this modularity let you present the model however you want, clean, armed, parked, or in attack configuration. In terms of historical fidelity, more than just a model, what really separates this model from many die-cast aircraft is how well it reflects the real Kurnass 2000 upgrade philosophy. The model captures the distinctive F-4E nose profile, the Israeli-specific markings and configuration, the feel of a late Cold War, heavily modernized Phantom, knowing that the real aircraft began as 184 before becoming 584 after modernization, of course, adds another layer of depth. It's not just a Phantom, it's a Phantom that evolved just like the real aircraft did. Anyway, it's a great model, solid, weighty, uh, feel tight, no visible gaps, durable paint application. I would rate this model A plus. However, let's shift and talk about the downsides here. So, no model is without flaws, right? And the HA1939 does have few considerations. So the first flaw is the availability. This is a discontinued release, which makes it harder to find and often more expensive. Originally retailing about 120 to 130, and now often sells for significantly more on the secondary market, sometimes exceeding $250, depending on model conditions. Second flaw, well, isn't flaw, the weathering depth. While the model is accurate to the actual article, so straight out of the box, it comes super clean and unweathered, which might not appeal to some collectors who like a bit of grime and realism. I would say it's not a major concern. It's just something to consider. Anyway, so within the diecast community, brands like Hobbymaster and often considered among the best in 1/72nd scale category, alongside names like Century Wings. Well, excuse me, Century Wings, they closed their doors and unfortunately they ran out of business. Anyway, in my humble opinion, Hobbymaster considered the best in 1/72nd scale category, and that reputation shows here with this particular example. This model doesn't try to reinvent the wheel, it simply executes everything at a very high level. So, final verdict, I think this is one of those models that quietly becomes a cornerstone of a collection. It succeeds because it balances three things extremely well: historical authenticity, physical quality, display versatility. Folks, I'm a big fan of the F-4 Phantom, especially its role in Israeli aviation. The F-4 Phantom has an incredibly rich operational history. Yep, lots of history, lots of missions. And if you're a fan of the F-4 Phantom, particularly in Israeli aviation, or whole Middle Eastern conflicts or Cold War strike aircraft. This model is easy to recommend, and honestly, it's hard to pass up. Even at inflated aftermarket prices, well, It might not be the rarest diecast Phantom ever made, but it captures something more important: the feeling of a real aircraft that lived long, evolving, and very human story. And in the world of diecast collecting, that's exactly what makes a model worth owning. It isn't just a diecast model sitting on a shelf. It's a snapshot of that transformation. Every panel line, every marking, every carefully replicated detail tells a part of a story of engineers who refused to give up on a proving airframe, of pilots who trusted it in combat, and of a machine that kept evolving when most others would have been retired. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.